In the dead of night, a newborn baby, barely an hour old, vanishes from the very hospital that should be keeping him safe. No one saw it coming. No one knew where he went. This is the strange and chilling disappearance of baby Jacob. Sarah and Mark Jennings had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. After years of trying, their dream had finally come true. At 1:45 a.m., Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Jacob. The room was filled with warmth, excitement, and the hopes of new parents. At 2:30 a.m., a nurse came in to bathe baby Jacob. Sarah and Mark were resting, exhausted yet blissful in the quiet of the room. The nurse left baby Jacob in his crib afterward, carefully placing him down. But by 3 a.m. their lives would change forever. Sarah and Mark woke up to find the crib empty. There was no sound, no disturbance, nothing to explain the sudden disappearance of their newborn son. The room was still, too still. The baby they had waited for so long was gone, and no one could explain how or why. How could a newborn, so fragile and vulnerable, simply vanish from his crib without anyone hearing or seeing a thing? What happened to baby Jacob during that brief moment of silence when the world seemed to be asleep? These questions hung in the air unanswered, leaving a chilling emptiness in their wake. But the mystery doesn't end here. There are questions that still remain unanswered. Questions that might change everything you thought you knew about this case. What really happened to baby Jacob that night? Could the hospital staff be hiding something? And who really took him? Before we continue and unravel the dark truth behind these questions, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell icon so you won't miss the shocking answers. As the hours passed and panic began to set in, the hospital staff launched a frantic search. They checked the other rooms, combed the hallways, and questioned anyone who might have seen something unusual. But despite their efforts, baby Jacob was nowhere to be found. No signs of struggle, no clues left behind. No one knew where he had gone, and no one seemed to have any answers. Was he taken? Or had something far more sinister happened in the shadows of that hospital? The investigation began almost immediately. Local authorities were called in, and they quickly began questioning the hospital staff, checking the records, and reviewing security footage. What they found, however, only deepened the mystery. The CCTV footage from the hallway outside baby Jacob's room showed a shadowy figure moving down the corridor, but the footage was too unclear to make out any details. Who was this figure? What were they doing there at such an odd hour? Could they be connected to the disappearance of baby Jacob? The investigators began to dig deeper into the hospital's records, hoping to uncover something that would explain this bizarre and unsettling case. But what they found next would send shockwaves through the investigation, and nothing will ever be the same again. The investigation began almost immediately, as law enforcement was called to the hospital to look into the strange disappearance of baby Jacob. The police had a lot of ground to cover, and time was of the essence. They started by questioning hospital staff, but there was no clear explanation for what had happened. Everyone seemed to be in shock, and no one had seen anything unusual. As the investigators delved deeper, they began reviewing hospital records and security footage in the hope of uncovering something that could point them in the right direction. They quickly noticed a strange lack of detail in the footage from the hospital's CCTV cameras. The footage from baby Jacob's room was oddly blurry, and the cameras positioned in the hallways weren't much better. The footage showed only vague, indistinct shadows moving around, never clearly identifying anyone who might have been in the area around the time the baby went missing. The lack of solid evidence was frustrating, but it wasn't enough to rule anything out. There were still too many unanswered questions. If the cameras hadn't captured anything clear, the staff's recollections weren't helping either. Everyone claimed to have been following their regular routines. Some said they had been in the break room, others claimed to have been on other parts of the hospital floor. But no one had any explanation for how baby Jacob had vanished from his crib. One nurse, however, caught the attention of the investigators. Nurse Linda Green. She had been on duty that night and was responsible for checking on baby Jacob just before he was bathed. She seemed to be a professional with a good reputation, but something about her nervous demeanor during questioning made the investigators suspicious. She couldn't explain why she had been near baby Jacob's room at such an odd hour or why she seemed so unsettled when asked about the disappearance. It wasn't until the police dug deeper into her background that things started to take an even darker turn. Nurse Green had worked at the hospital for over 15 years, with no prior issues in her career. But when investigators started looking into her personal life, they uncovered some startling information. Nurse Green had never been married, never had children of her own. She had endured a tragic miscarriage many years ago, a loss that had clearly affected her deeply. The more the investigators learned about her personal struggles, the more a chilling thought began to take root. Could Nurse Linda Green have been so desperate for a child of her own that she might have taken baby Jacob? As the investigation continued, the more unsettling details emerged. The police began to piece together a picture of a woman driven by a powerful, almost obsessive desire to have a child. Could this explain her strange behavior and her sudden, unexplained presence near baby Jacob's crib? Was it possible that Linda Green had taken the newborn, seeing an opportunity to fulfill her deep longing for motherhood, no matter the cost? The investigation into Nurse Linda Green would soon reveal a web of lies and secrets. But for now, the mystery deepened. The question on everyone's mind was, could Nurse Green really be involved in baby Jacob's disappearance? As the search for the truth continued, investigators were left with even more chilling questions. As the investigation into Nurse Linda Green's past continued, an unexpected discovery would uncover a shocking twist, one that would leave everyone stunned. What secret was she hiding? And how far would she go to keep it buried? As the investigation into Nurse Linda Green deepened, new and more unsettling facts began to emerge about the hospital itself. The police weren't just looking at one suspicious nurse anymore. They were starting to wonder if something much bigger was at play within the walls of the hospital. The staff had been questioned repeatedly, but something didn't sit right. They began to question the hospital's record-keeping practices, the security measures, and most importantly, the activities surrounding baby Jacob's disappearance. The hospital, it seemed, had more secrets than anyone could have imagined. The first breakthrough came when investigators reviewed the staff shift logs. They found several discrepancies in the records from that night. The nurses' logs, which were supposed to be detailed accounts of every procedure performed, were strangely sparse. The timestamps didn't add up, and some of the entries seemed deliberately vague. But it wasn't just the records that were troubling. The entire atmosphere around baby Jacob's disappearance felt like it had been orchestrated to cover something up. As the investigators dug deeper, they discovered something even more disturbing: an unregistered dead body in the hospital morgue. The body of a newborn had been placed there earlier that night, but it wasn't logged into the hospital's system. No one knew how it got there. It wasn't listed as part of the hospital's official records, and no one could explain why it had been kept in the morgue under mysterious circumstances. This wasn't a stillbirth. It was an unexplained, anonymous infant. Could it have been baby Jacob? Or was it another child, possibly switched out in some twisted exchange? The more the investigators looked into the morgue records, the more they realized this wasn't the first time something strange had occurred at the hospital. There had been incidents in the past: unexplained deaths, missing newborns, and other oddities that had never been fully explained or investigated. It was almost as if the hospital was hiding these things, and no one had bothered to question it until now. This revelation only deepened the mystery surrounding baby Jacob's disappearance. Was the hospital itself somehow involved in a bigger, more insidious plot? The suspicion grew even stronger when the police returned to question Nurse Linda Green once more. They had uncovered a series of troubling details about her past, details that painted a picture of a woman obsessed with having a child, willing to go to any lengths to satisfy that need. Linda's personal history showed that, after a devastating miscarriage years ago, she had never been able to let go of her grief. It was this pain, the loss of her own child, that had haunted her for years. She had even attempted to adopt, but each time, she had been rejected. It became clear to the investigators that Linda had been desperately trying to fill a void in her life, a void that only a child could heal. But could this overwhelming desire have pushed her to steal baby Jacob from the hospital? Could the missing baby be part of a twisted plan to create the family she had always dreamed of? The authorities were no closer to finding baby Jacob, but they now had a deeper understanding of the motivations that might have driven Nurse Green to commit such a heinous act. Was it possible that she had switched baby Jacob with the unidentified newborn found in the morgue? Could the baby in the morgue have been baby Jacob all along? The more they investigated, the clearer it became. Linda Green's involvement was not just a possibility, it seemed like the only explanation. But what was her next move? Where had she taken baby Jacob? And why hadn't anyone noticed sooner? The investigators had only scratched the surface of Linda Green's dark secret, but it was now time for the final pieces of the puzzle to fall into place. As the investigation progressed, they would soon uncover something so twisted and unexpected. It would turn everything they thought they knew upside down. With each passing moment, the truth seemed more elusive, but what the investigation would uncover next was far darker than anyone could have imagined. What secret was Nurse Linda Green hiding, and how far would she go to keep baby Jacob for herself? As the investigation into Nurse Linda Green deepened, the search for baby Jacob expanded beyond the confines of the hospital. The authorities had little to go on, no direct evidence of where the baby might be, and the hospital's security footage remained unhelpful, showing only fleeting shadows and blurred movements. But with each passing hour, the pressure mounted. The police reached out to the local community, spreading the word that a newborn had gone missing, and they urged anyone with information to come forward. Search parties were formed, combing through nearby areas, hospitals, and shelters, desperately hoping for any sign of the baby. But as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that baby Jacob had vanished without a trace. The hospital, meanwhile, was under intense scrutiny. Investigators had begun to question more of the staff members, trying to find out who had been on duty that night. While the nurse staff seemed cooperative, many had begun to feel the weight of suspicion surrounding the disappearance. Among those who remained calm during the investigation, Nurse Linda Green stood out as an enigmatic figure. Despite her earlier nervousness, she continued to deny any involvement. She insisted that she had been doing her rounds, checking on other patients, and had no idea where baby Jacob had gone yet. As the investigation continued, the inconsistencies in Linda's story began to build. The police discovered that Linda's activities on the night of baby Jacob's disappearance had been far from routine. She had been seen near the morgue around the same time the baby went missing, though she had never officially been logged as being there. This raised even more red flags. Why would Linda be in the morgue at such a late hour? What was she doing there? And why hadn't she mentioned it during her previous interviews? It was becoming more and more apparent that something was off about Linda's behavior. The investigators began to wonder if she had been hiding something. Could it be that Linda Green, driven by her overwhelming desire to have a child, had taken baby Jacob from the hospital, switched him with the unidentified baby in the morgue, and then hidden him away to raise as her own? It wasn't just a question of motive anymore, it was a question of opportunity. And Linda had certainly had the opportunity. As the search for baby Jacob intensified, authorities were faced with another troubling development. The more they looked into the hospital's history, the more they found unsettling details that raised serious concerns about the hospital's past. There had been previous incidents, some of which seemed eerily similar to baby Jacob's case: unexplained disappearances, reports of babies being swapped, and other mysterious occurrences that had never been fully explained. What was going on in that hospital? Could there have been a pattern of babies being stolen over the years, or was this just an isolated case, with Nurse Green acting alone in her desperation to have a child? The question now was whether or not baby Jacob was still alive, and if so, where was he? Was Linda Green still hiding him? And if she was, how long could she keep up the ruse before someone uncovered the truth? The authorities were running out of leads, and baby Jacob's parents, Sarah and Mark, were left in an agonizing limbo. They had spent the last few weeks in a state of constant anxiety, unable to grieve properly because they had no answers. Every day they held on to the hope that their son would be found, but with each passing day, the truth seemed further and further out of reach. In the midst of this turmoil, a breakthrough came when the police received an anonymous tip. A woman, speaking under the veil of secrecy, claimed to have seen Nurse Linda Green leaving the hospital with a newborn baby, just days after baby Jacob's disappearance. The woman had been walking near the hospital when she noticed Linda walking quickly, her face hidden behind a scarf, cradling an infant in her arms. The woman said she was too far away to see the child's face clearly, but the timing and circumstances made it impossible to ignore. This new lead provided a glimmer of hope for Sarah and Mark, but it also raised new, terrifying questions. Had Linda Green truly taken their son? Was baby Jacob out there somewhere, hidden away by the nurse who had become so desperate to have a child of her own? The investigators now had something concrete to follow, and it seemed like the pieces were finally starting to come together. The truth was now closer than ever before, but as the investigation narrowed in on Nurse Linda Green, a shocking revelation would soon turn everything upside down. Would the search for baby Jacob finally come to an end, or would a new twist lead the investigation down an even darker path? As the investigation into Nurse Linda Green continued, the police were left with a burning question. What was she hiding? The anonymous tip-off had been a turning point, leading the investigators to a series of new leads that ultimately connected Linda to the mysterious disappearance of baby Jacob. But as they dug deeper, they realized that Linda had been living a life of secrets, each one darker than the last. The breakthrough came when police gained access to Linda Green's personal records. They discovered that, for years, Linda had been attempting to adopt a child. She had filed multiple applications for adoption, each time met with rejection. Each attempt seemed to fuel a growing obsession in Linda's mind, a relentless desire to have a child of her own, something that had consumed her since the devastating loss of her own child many years ago. Her miscarriage had left a scar on her soul, a wound that never healed, and with each passing year, that wound seemed to drive her further into desperation. As the police connected the dots, it became clear that Nurse Linda Green had been planning something for a long time. Her obsession with becoming a mother had led her to hatch a plan so twisted it left investigators reeling. On the night baby Jacob went missing, Linda had been the last person seen near his room, but there was more. Her actions after baby Jacob's disappearance were even more incriminating. She had been spotted leaving the hospital just days after the baby vanished, carrying a newborn wrapped in a blanket. With this new information, the investigation began to take a chilling turn. Linda Green had taken baby Jacob from the hospital. She had smuggled him out under the cover of darkness, hoping to keep him hidden away as her own child. But what had driven her to such lengths? It wasn't just a matter of a mother wanting a child. It was about the deep pain and grief that had consumed her for years, a pain that made her believe this was the only way to heal her broken heart. The next step in the investigation was to find out where Linda had taken the baby. They tracked down the locations of the places she had visited in the days following baby Jacob's disappearance. But each lead turned out to be a dead end. Linda was careful, keeping a low profile, knowing that the authorities were closing in on her. But Eventually, a breakthrough came when a neighbor of Linda's came forward with a piece of vital information. The neighbor claimed to have seen Linda leave the house a few days after the disappearance with a baby in her arms, heading to a nearby park. It was now a race against time. The authorities rushed to the park, hoping to find some trace of baby Jacob. After hours of searching, they found a nearby abandoned building where Linda had been spotted. Inside the building, they found a crib, baby clothes, and a stash of other items that seemed to confirm their worst fears. Linda had been keeping baby Jacob hidden there, hoping to raise him as her own. The discovery of baby Jacob's hiding place was a devastating blow to Sarah and Mark, who had never imagined that someone they trusted, someone who had cared for their son, could be behind his disappearance. But the truth was undeniable. Nurse Linda Green had stolen their baby, taken him into hiding, and had been living with him as though he were her own child. It was a chilling revelation, one that left Sarah and Mark struggling to comprehend the depths of Linda's obsession. But even as Linda's secret was laid bare, one final question remained. How would the authorities handle Linda's actions? What punishment could she face for taking a child and raising him in secrecy for so long? And how would baby Jacob adjust to the life that had been stolen from him? The investigation was coming to a close, but the emotional toll on everyone involved had only just begun. Linda's actions would haunt the hospital, the Jennings family, and everyone who had crossed her path. The twisted tale of baby Jacob's disappearance was a reminder of how far some would go to fulfill a need so deep it clouded their judgment, destroying lives in the process. After weeks of searching, the investigation finally came to a head. The breakthrough came when the authorities received one last crucial tip-off. Linda Green, desperate to hide her secret, had been keeping baby Jacob in a secluded nearby house belonging to one of her trusted neighbors. The police quickly raided the property, and what they found inside left them stunned. In a small, dimly lit room, they discovered baby Jacob, safe but frightened, lying in a crib. His clothes were worn, and his face was pale. But the moment the officers picked him up, he began to cry. The baby's recovery was a small victory in the otherwise tragic case. Linda Green, realizing that her time was up, was arrested and taken into custody. As the evidence piled up against her, her detailed plans, her secret hiding place, and the testimonies of neighbors and hospital staff, it became clear that Linda had taken baby Jacob not out of malice, but out of a deep, uncontrollable need for motherhood. The investigation revealed the full extent of her obsession. She had stolen baby Jacob because she couldn't accept the loss of her own child and had tried to replace him with this innocent newborn. With Linda in custody, the next step was to return baby Jacob to his rightful parents, Sarah and Mark Jennings. The emotional reunion between the parents and their long-lost son was nothing short of overwhelming. The police handed baby Jacob back to Sarah and Mark, but as they held their son in their arms, a wave of conflicting emotions hit them. Had endured so much pain, grief, and uncertainty over the past few weeks, but now they faced an even deeper dilemma. Despite the overwhelming joy of having their son back, Sarah and Mark realized that their family was already complete. They had a baby girl, and while they had been devastated by the loss of baby Jacob, they now knew in their hearts that they could have more children in the future. But Linda Green, who had always dreamed of becoming a mother, had never been able to fulfill that dream. The Jennings parents, filled with compassion, made a decision that would change everything. In an act of selflessness, Sarah and Mark decided to give baby Jacob to nurse Linda Green. The moment was emotional, heart-wrenching, but also filled with an unspoken understanding. They knew that Linda, who had been consumed by grief and the desire to be a mother, needed this more than anyone else. While the law would hold Linda accountable for her actions, Sarah and Mark knew that this act of kindness could offer her a chance at the family she had always longed for. As Linda took baby Jacob into her arms, a wave of emotion swept over her. The woman who had caused so much pain and fear for the Jennings family now held the child she had longed for in a moment of unexpected redemption. Tears filled her eyes, not just from happiness, but from relief. For the first time in years, Linda Green felt whole again. As baby Jacob's story came to a close, something extraordinary happened. In an act of compassion, Sarah and Mark Jennings gave their son to the woman who had once stolen him away, believing that every child deserves the love and care of a mother. This story is a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, the light of kindness can shine through. But the question remains, would you have done the same thing if you were in Sarah and Mark's shoes? Would you have given your child to a woman who had caused you so much pain, yet needed the child more than anyone else? This is the kind of kindness baby Jacob's parents showed, and this is the kind of act that deserves recognition. If you believe in the power of compassion and forgiveness, make sure to like this story, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. Let's spread this kind of kindness together.